I think it's got a lot to do with the gender pay gap and the affordability.
We usually look at the female counterpart to see, does she like the property? Because if she doesn't have a good expression on her face, that sale's not coming through.
Welcome to another episode of Property Now. I'm your host, Michael Carbone. You can call me Carbs. And many people that are watching us today will notice a couple of things. The set is very different.
Yeah, spot the difference.
Spot the difference. It's a bit more comfortable. I like it.
Yeah,
so, shout out to producer PJ for setting it all up. The other thing is I'm the only bloke at the table today, so I'm a little bit nervous. I'm a little bit scared. And that's the point.
Minority today.
We will find out why in a moment. But joining us today, our experts today, I've known this woman for probably about 8 or 9 years. She was one of the people who hired me at a little company called Mirvac 8 or 9 years ago. Diana Sarcasmo, you're now the Managing Director for Residential Colliers. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
And also joining us is Puja, Kanna, Associate Director, Sales, Marketing and Design at Ellipse Property. That's a busy title. How did you find the time to get here today?
A little bit about me, because obviously I'm sitting with Diana and Michael, yourself. And when I entered the property market, I came from a design background and having done architecture. And I was looking at obviously small companies like Mirvac.
Small companies, yes.
And, Diana's name popped up in, heading the design team, but she also had sales and marketing in her role. So that was more of an inspiration for me. This is from 6 years ago. And in my head, I was thinking, oh my God, look at this woman. She's so successful. And, one day I want to be, meet her or be like her.
Here you are, yeah.
And look at me today. I can't believe.
You made it.
I cannot believe. When she walked in the other day for last year, for one of our projects at Granville, and I'm looking at her and I had no idea she had transitioned into Colliers. And I'm like, after the meeting, I held myself back and I said to her, I need to tell you something. I've been watching you on LinkedIn and here you are today in my office and we are sitting here together. So this is more of an inspiration for me to be here, and such a big opportunity to sitting with Diana, yourself, Michael, and being in the Coposit office.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I saw firsthand. This is going to be a Diana love fest.
No, it can't be. It can't be. We need to move on. We need to move on.
She's a very inspirational leader, great mentor to men and women, but a lot of women in particular. Once Diana left Mirvac and moved on to Colliers, there's probably some women that are watching today that are still at Mirvac or at other companies that are in, high profile positions who, would probably attribute a lot of that success to their mentorship with Diana. So you know who you are if you're watching. So well done. You mentioned obviously your projects, Ellipse, with Ellipse Property at Granville. We'll talk a little bit about that later because it is available with Coposit, which is fantastic. Our regular guest, Savannah Lobbe.
Yeah, I'm back.
The customer champion. Great to be back. Sav is back. We had to have you today because really today we're unpacking some data. Look, it's a tricky topic, so that's why I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm glad the experts are here. But basically the data that we're seeing out there shows that the trend is top level in most areas, more men own properties than women. That's high level sort of stuff. Yeah. So we're going to dig into that data today, and we sort of want to we know that a lot of our audience, a lot of our Coposit buyers, a lot of our Coposit viewers, researchers, database are female. So how do we give them confidence to understand the data, to make inquiries, to get into property? And that's what this is really about today. So I'm going to unpack some of that data and then we can talk about it. So firstly, one big thing, sole versus joint ownership. And this is from CoreLogic. At the moment, men are more likely to own property on their own than women are. So 52% of male homeowners own the property on their own, as opposed to in a couple or women are more likely to be in joint ownership. So 53% of women are in joint ownership. Not a huge gap, but certainly says to me that men are probably a little bit more prepared to take a risk or a little more confident to buy on their own. So that's one big thing. In all buyer type demographics, more men own property than women. The big one is investment properties. So men, according to Broker News, men are more likely to own investment properties, with 14.2% of males owning at least one residential investment property, compared to 11.4% of females. As you go down into younger demographics as well, that drastically changes. So if you look at Gen Z, 6.4% of young women own an investment property compared to 13.8% of young men. So that starts to grow.
Wow.
Right. So that's something we need to address, because obviously 40% of our Coposit buyers are Gen Z to millennial. So we want to sort of change that. Again, speaking to the generational difference, and again, CoreLogic data tells us that among Gen Z, 51% of males own a property, significantly outpacing women. 27.3% of females own a property in that demographic as well. So massive differences. Puja, I don't know, what are you seeing out there at Ellipse Property? Are you seeing the same kind of trends in the projects that you guys are selling, developing, building?
Yes, it's a bit of a mix for us, because when sort of a couple is walking in, we usually look at the female counterpart to see, does she like the property? Because if she doesn't have a good expression on her face, that sale's not coming through. So they do have a very important role to play in when buying their homes and where they're going to live. But when it comes as an investment, it's usually men walking in the door and taking a decision. They might not even have their wife or their partner with them at that point. And we barely see any females walking in saying, I want to buy an investment property. No.
Got you.
So the only times when I've seen women walk in the door wanting to buy a property by themselves is either they are single or they are getting divorced. So that is, and especially the divorcees, they are, in this position because they haven't thought about it before. They have nothing backing them up, and now they are separating, and it's a very emotional stage they are in when they are trying to enter into property. So like we spoke about, having more younger women step into investing and being part of the property journey, we should be encouraging them more, because down the track, you don't want to be in a position where you're also struggling emotionally and trying to make such a big decision. So that's the trend I'm seeing on ground in market happening for the past 2 years that I've been in sale.
That makes sense. My wife makes a lot of our decisions as well in that regard, so I don't want to... Great news for long-time listeners and viewers of the Property Now podcast. We have our first live audience event coming up April 1st in Sydney. So if you would love to be there in person to watch us do what we do, we've got some incredible guests coming up. The topic will be fear of the unknown when it comes to the property market. It's going to be an awesome chat, and I hope to see you there. Link in the show notes. That's an interesting one about the divorcees, because that would be a really tricky time. So to all of a sudden, if you haven't really thought about it on your own before, and all of a sudden you're having to find a place to live, and probably very quickly, that would be a tricky one. Diana, nationally across Colliers, you're seeing a lot of these sort of data and trends. What are you seeing? A lot of the same data, or are you seeing some differences?
Yeah, and I guess it depends. What we see is women are definitely more attracted to the apartment style living rather than sort of new sort of large master plan communities. And I think a lot of that comes down to women feeling safer in an apartment and sort of more secure, and having a lot less maintenance for them. But I think overall, we are seeing more and more women, getting into the property market, and we definitely want to see, more people coming into the market. I think the biggest challenge for women is, typically, there is a gender gap. We all know there's a gender gap, and we know that there's certain absolute essential, important, professions like nursing, teaching, childcare, aged care, where it's predominantly women, and those jobs are paid less. And we know the biggest hurdle for anyone getting into property is saving deposit. So, and I think that's why, some of, people are challenged getting, into property. But the good thing is, at the moment, there is some fantastic incentives that the governments have got for essential workers, in terms of, more affordable accommodation, and, different incentives to get in, these essential workers living in, in the communities in where they're working. And there's, products like Coposit, which makes it, does make it that much easier to get into your first property.
Well, thank you for saying that. And look out, because we've got an election coming up, and housing affordability is a massive topic. So there's going to be more of those incentives talked about, discussed. So keep that in mind over time as well. Sav, our Coposit data.
Yes.
There's a lot of similarities in what we're seeing with our customer base. there's also one massive difference, which I can't wait for you to talk about, because I think it's actually quite cool what we're seeing from an investor standpoint. But what are you seeing in terms, maybe speaking to what Diana mentioned, right, in terms of that gender pay gap, we're seeing that reflecting in figures.
In the numbers. Yeah, for sure. So definitely at Coposit, the trends that you were mentioning are similar. So in terms of couples, females buying, males buying, there's definitely more men buying. And then over all the different categories, first home buyers, investors, they are slightly higher than women. In terms of couples, so we actually have the majority of our customers are couples. So they're generally younger couples. And yeah, that it's obviously good to see that younger people are getting into the market, because it speaks to age. I think there's a lot more younger people using Coposit. In terms of the numbers, yes. So males definitely take higher risks, and I think that's reflected in numbers in terms of purchase price and their weekly payments. So I think for me, when I look at that, I think it's partly due to, you know, maybe being paid higher, maybe being able to save more. So there's definitely a difference there.
What are the numbers in terms of, like, what are men paying on average for their properties via Coposit versus women?
Yeah, so men tend to go for high price properties around $950, whereas women go for about $850. So there's about on average. And then in terms of the weekly payments, men sit around $1,000 per week, and women around $880.
Do you think men are bigger risk takers, Diana?
Yeah, perhaps. I think it's got a lot to do with the gender pay gap, and the affordability, and it's extraordinary to believe. In 1971, prior to that, women weren't allowed to buy a property unless they had a male guarantor. So that shift is. And that wasn't that long ago. So, it's definitely changing. And, I think women should be encouraged to get into property and, get in and buy your first home. And I think, that gender pay gap is the biggest problem. But, part of that is, just get in to where you can afford. And, if you've got to work out your mortgage repayments, you've got to work out how much you can borrow, and then sort of look at what you can buy within that and just get into the property market and don't delay it.
True. I guess that's why we see a lot more couples buying, right? Together they have more borrowing capacity.
Definitely.
So that certainly makes a lot of sense. We'll be seeing that everywhere. The biggest place where Coposit buyers are bucking the trend is investors. Can we speak to
definitely. So it's definitely still more men buying, but there's a very slight difference in percentage. So it's almost 50-50 in terms of investments. In terms of first home buyers, now I think investors or first home buyers, sometimes they cross over as well. You might be a first home buyer buying a property to rent out. Men definitely dominate in that. As first home buyers, they dominate. So to live in, which is interesting, and as owner occupiers as well. So buying their second home or third home, it's men as well. But in terms of investors, like on the right path.
On par.
Yeah.
I think that's huge because, like I said, in terms of investors, men are typically the trend is that much more men are investing in property, but with Coposit pretty much on par.
And I think it's because they can, everyone can get into the market quicker because obviously the lower entry level helps.
I reckon it's because you guys are a bit smarter than us, so maybe you're getting into the trends a little bit
we're catching up.
That's amazing. Puja, any stories either from market or from yourself? Is there any how you bought your first property or investment property, or stories that you could share that might?
I think it's more of a personal story of when we came to Sydney, Australia 6 years ago, and we quickly went into the pandemic, and me and my family, my husband, we were thinking of, obviously you want to get into a property market. We were sort of in our mid-30s, and with having that initial 10% deposit was the first hurdle. Having it locally here, we had investments overseas, but that was the first hurdle. And second was, where's the market going? What's going to happen? We weren't PR then, so should we invest somewhere, start something, and by the time the property settles, we hope that we will be PR by then. So there were a number of things that were going on in our mind. The topmost was the 10% deposit. Like, what can we do to get that, and can we start saving from now on? Had we known Coposit, I don't know where
we went around 6 years
exactly.
ago, but so it's okay.
That product wasn't available. Maybe if it was, we would have been on a journey, and we would have, by the time, now we bought our first property after 6 years, we would have already have something going on for us. So we've lost out on that time. So all I want to say is, in terms of stories, don't wait for the right time. Just build on what you have now. See what is the best tool you have. This is a tool to get into the property market. See what best tools you have. See what incentives work for you. Get into the property market, because the property is only going to get more expensive, and the shortage that we keep talking about is there, and it's real. So that's my personal story to contrute here.
It's a great story. Just to clarify, PR is permanent residency. Congratulations to Sav, who you just got
finally
yours.
10 years later.
So Puja, were you guys renting at first? Well, that's a typical story, right? You guys rent first and then move into
renting first. Post the pandemic, rents started to go high up, and we were, questioning what are we doing with this money, and should we invest in off the plan property? Should we buy a product that's completed? So we were in two minds, but our family was at a different sort of a stage where we wanted something ready to move in, and we had to do that at that point. But now buying an off the plan property is not off the cards, and Coposit is a great way to start that journey. So I might be one of your future
Looking forward
customers.
to that. You'll be speaking to our customer expert over here sitting next to me. Thank you so much. We don't expect you guys to be selling Coposit in any way, so that's awesome. Thank you. Diana, what about your personal stories? Is there anything you can share that might give some insight or some tips to women wanting to buy, or even men wanting to buy, to be fair? I think we can all learn from this discussion.
Yeah, mine's sort of similar advice to Puja in terms of don't wait. I think the biggest thing with property is, there's a lot of information out there, and there's more information than there has ever been, and don't let that overwhelm you. Just keep it to the basics, which is, understand how much you can borrow, how much you can afford to repay, work out what your budget is, and get into the market as soon as you possibly can, and start small. I think starting small is the absolute key, because that allows you to sort of upgrade. And most people, over a long period of time, property is a long investment. You can almost, and I know everyone's situation's different, but I know I've made more money than I could ever earn just from, buying a property, then upgrading, and then upgrading again. When you sort of look back, that was probably one of the best decisions I did make. But it's never too late, and just don't wait.
I think take the long-term view as well, right? So over time, you can't look at it as, it's expensive right now. What's it going to be like in 10, 20, 30 years? That's really what you got to think about, because like you said, you're never going to make the money that you could potentially make in that time, like with your house or properties sort of sitting there. So that's really good advice, I believe. So both of you are here. Both of you work with us on, Colliers works with Coposit on a number of projects across the board. Puja, Ellipse Property work with us at Eastern Cowper and Granville. I want to give you a chance to talk about that project a little bit. It is available via Coposit. Is there any quick sale? This is the quick salesy bit, so take the opportunity. Diana, you might have something to say about it as well, but I'll leave it to you guys. Quick elevator pitch.
It's a great project for first-home buyers and investors to get into the property market. With Sydney prices going up so quickly, the price point is there, the proximity to Parramatta is there, so it's a up-and-coming suburb, having Coposit there definitely helps bring in that sales tool and more opportunity for people to start stepping into property market. I wouldn't understand why people would not invest in a product that's readily available at that price point with a good ICERT rated builder and developer.
Amazing. So get in with 10K with Coposit. That's the ad bit out of the way. So I think one thing that's important to note as well is I think the property industry has evolved and changed a lot. Diana, since you've been in the industry, it was probably very different when you first started in terms of the role that women play in property development, in construction in general. You have a lot to do with the women in property as well, which is fantastic. How have you seen in your career things change, and how does that help potentially female buyers today?
Yes, I think it's changed enormously, over the time that I've been in the industry, and it's great to see so many more females in the property industry, and having great roles and also leading projects. And I think when you have got diversity in a team, whether from the architectural team to the interiors team to the development team, what that does, it just creates a more sort of thoughtful and inclusive product, so that you've got lots of different perspectives, all looking at a project and making sure that it can be the best that it can be. And I think that you need that diversity of thinking and thought, whether it's gender, age, ethnicity, all of that is really important.
Yeah, so true. And I even think from a design perspective, especially, I think back to what you said at the start, Puja, whereas, a couple will walk in and it's typically the female that's making that decision based on how it looks, how it feels. And if you look at construction in the last 50, 60 years, how buildings look today versus how they looked back then is very different. So I think that's an incredible point. And then we've got people that are new to the industry as well, Sav. So, I mean, how do you feel coming into a new country? Well, you've been with Coposit for 3-4 years. Yeah. You've been here for a little bit longer. Yeah. How do you feel being in this industry as a female?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously within our office, maybe we're in the property industry, but we're also in the tech industry. So that is also an industry that more women need to get into. But within the team, we've got a few females, but we definitely need to get more women on board.
So
that's right.
We encourage everyone to apply.
Yes. But maybe that, I don't know, maybe that reflects, I suppose, what's going on in general, that we just need to get more women into the industry.
I think so too. Look, great chat today. Let's wrap it up with I'll go around the room. I'm going to start with you, Puja, so start thinking now. What is your one key takeaway, concise piece of advice to any women that are out there wanting to buy property today? I
think it's get in now and ask the stupid questions, because if you don't know the answer, find a mentor, find the right person who has done it before and replicate it. It's easy.
I love that. I was talking to my wife this morning. I said, what can I bring to this episode today? And she said, look, you will go and ask questions and not be afraid at not knowing the answer, whereas I might be hesitant to do that. So I think that's wonderful advice. Diana, what's your one key piece of advice?
I think my one key piece of advice is there's so much data out there, and the way you buy property has changed so much over the last 20 years. When you think back to, before REA, and Domain, you'd get a newspaper and you'd have to look it up and you'd find an address and you'd have to go out to the property and actually have a look at it at an open hour to actually see what it actually looked like. You couldn't sit back and look at it all online. And I think there's so much information. It's so fantastic that there's a lot of information, and there's a lot of research. Is just don't be overwhelmed with the information. Just really work out where you want to invest or where you want to live. Really narrow down and just focus on what's within the realms of possibility for you, and don't delay.
Is there anyone you'd speak to for advice, like any particular professionals?
Yeah, I think there's lots of professionals out there that can help you, and even if it's I think any friends or colleagues, but mortgage brokers have got an enormous amount of information. Real estate agents can be really helpful. A property lawyer can be helpful as well. And I think the main thing is don't just rely on one person's advice. Hear multiple people's advice and then make your own decision, and it'll make you much more confident making that decision.
Make your decision based on an informed decision, I suppose. Yeah. So what about you?
Yeah, no, definitely. I would agree with that. That at least for my personal journey, asking questions has been key, and I feel like I'm hassling people asking so many questions, but I think it's very important because it gives you perspective, and especially as a first home buyer, like you're extra nervous about it because it's a big, big decision. So
I love that. Yeah. I've got nothing to add. Like, you guys are amazing. But I think the key is it doesn't matter who you are. Like, I think this advice applies to anyone. So let's all get out there, do the research, and if you're confident and keen, then go for it. This has been an amazing conversation. I want to thank you all for being here with us today. I'm Michael Carbone, and we'll see you on Property Now next time.
This is Jason He, the sexiest voice in property, here to tell you that the Property Now podcast offers opinions on Australian property news for informational and entertainment purposes only and general in nature. It does not take into account your objectives, financial situation or needs. It does not constitute professional advice. Always seek expert guidance before making any property-related decisions.